Now that we have a table that can generate statistics, let's look at making it a little bit prettier, fancier. So what we want to do is when we roll a stat, it'd be nice to tell at a glance, is the stat very low? Is it very high? And also we want to look at the modifiers. So in order to do that, we need to look at our code. And you'll see in here that I'm generating a stat for each of the inner HTMLs, so each table data item has its role. Now, that role gets converted into text when it's put into the table, and we want to keep it as a number. So it might be to our benefit to actually store that number so that we can look at it for the rest of the information. Now, in order to access that, I want to create a centralized location to access it. And while we're doing this, I want to reduce the amount of code that we're looking at as well. So let's create a list of the names of our attributes. Okay, we'll do that like this. So the square bracket is the beginning of the attribute list. And we're just going to put all 6 of our attributes in here. By centralizing this in one location, we can look at the information as a whole. And that creates our list of names. Now, in addition to the list of names, we're also going to want to have our list of stats. And on this one, we can just simply create an empty list. And then what we'll do is let's go ahead and populate that list. And I'm going to get a little messy in the code here momentarily. So in our generate function, let's go ahead and generate our 6 stats. So we'll say stats. Well, let's just do 1. So we'll do the first one. And we need to use what's called an index. And computers begin counting at 0. So index 0 will be our first one. And this will be the strength. We want the strength to be a role. Okay. And let's go ahead and use this. So, and I also want to see if this is going to work by testing to see, do my IDs work from my list? So I'm going to say names at index 0. The inner HTML of that is going to be my stats at index 0. So hopefully this works. Now when I roll, it should change that value. So let's go look at it, reload my page, and it's still changing. And just to double check, and yes, I am using the correct code. I just want to double check that because sometimes when you're working in a browser, it may not refresh correctly. So I do know that I'm working with the correct page. Okay, so what's really interesting about this is that now that we're using those values, we can essentially remove all of this code and replace it with a loop that's going to go through all of that information for us. So what that looks like is I can create a for loop here. A for loop is essentially a construct that allows you to count from one number to another. Now I know that I have 6 statistics, so I'm going to create a for loop that counts through 6. So I'm going to start my for loop with a variable I. Classic programmer likes to use i's for numbers. I'm going to start the number at 0. And we're going to go through 6. And we're going to add 1 each time through the loop. Alright, so this is going to give me the numbers 1 through 6. And then I want to add these 2 stats right here into my loop. And this should eliminate the need for all of that code there. Now, I do want to make this pretty, so I'm going to tab over my code. so that it's easier to read. I'm saving that, and let's go ahead and see what it looks like in the web browser. So reload the page. Okay, it's only affecting strength, so let's go back and look, see. And of course, I'm only affecting stats at 0. But I want 0 through 5, and my loop here is storing the numbers in the variable I. So I'm going to change that 0 to I in the stats, the names, and again in the stats over here. Okay. Now let's try this again. And there we go. All 6 stats are getting changed again. All right, wonderful. Now, let's look at this. So let's say that I want to change the background color of each cell based on its value. And what I want to do is, if the stat is very low, and we'll consider very low to be any stat that's less than 10, we'll color that red. Any stat greater than 14 will be cyan, and we'll do all the other ones as green. So let's go ahead and look at that. So if my stats at I is less than 10, so this is the one where we want to set the background to be, and that probably should be consistent with these here, so you don't have to do it that way, but there are programmers that like their braces on the line, and we should be consistent with our style. We shouldn't mix styles. So I want to get the style for my element, and to make this easier, let's do this. Let's store the element in a variable. So let's call it variable element is equal to that document get element by ID, and then we're going to set the elements in our HTML. So what this does now, I have this variable element that is storing the element we're looking at. The reason why I want it as a variable is because with a variable we can do multiple things with it. So we don't have to do the get element by ID every time we want to modify something in that element. We can use its variable name instead. And what we want to do is we want to take that element and we want to set an attribute on that element. Remember, the attributes are the variables that we put in HTML tags. So this would be like your class, your ID, and in this case we want to set the attribute for style, and we can affect the entire style here, by the way. So we're going to be able to put pretty much anything we want inside the style for this that is a standard CSS. But in this case we just want to set the background color, and the low number we want to be red. Okay, so let's save that and test to see how that works. So here we had 9 and 6, those are below, and everything else was above the threshold. So that works. Let's go back to the code, and let's put in else if the stats at I, and this time let's do the one that if it's greater than 14, we want it to be cyan. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this code. We want to set it to cyan. And you can pick any color you want. I just like cyan. So let's test that. Might take a few hits before we actually get one. Oh, hey, look at that. Something else is happening here. I forgot to change it back. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick and get a last element in here. If it's not either of those, let's set it to green. And that should fix that it's setting it back to what it needs to be. Okay, so let's test it now. Reload the page, and there we go. So I'm seeing cyan, I'm seeing red, and I'm seeing green. And the values look like they're correct. Okay, so we were able to color code it. Now let's look at doing the modifier. In a standard D20 system, the modifier actually has a mathematical formula. The formula for determining what the bonus or the penalty is subtract 10 from the main stat and then divide by 2. And that will get you your modifier. So let's go ahead and put the next thing in here, and we'll do that. So my modifier is equal to the stats at index I minus 10 divided by 2. And just to make sure, let's go ahead and put the subtraction in parentheses. Remember PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So we do want the subtraction to happen first. So there we go. And now we need to access the element. If we look at it, we want it to go in the table data right next to the original one. So we need the next element. So let's go ahead and target that. And what we want here is we want the element's next sibling. So let's go ahead and look at this. So the mod will be the element's next element sibling. Okay. So let's go ahead and try and modify that. So the mod's inner HTML will be equal to that modifier that we just calculated. So let's go ahead and test this real quick. All right. Now we're getting fractional values here. We don't want that. So we do need to floor that division. And let's test this again. And there we go. And if we want to make this look a little prettier, we probably should go in there and center the tags. So let's just do a real quick style on that. So we're going to do style, and then TD, text, align, center, just a real quick one off. All right, let's go check that. And there we go. And that's how you color code and do the modifiers. I hope you enjoyed this brief case study.